Welcome to Story Times, a place where every story carries a message. Here, we share powerful stories about life, struggle, courage, hope, and victory. Each story is inspired by real emotions and real-life lessons, meant to touch your heart and open your mind. Sit back, relax, and let the story speak to you. This is Story Times. In a quiet town where people had learned to look away, there lived a boy named VDM. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the loudest. But something about him was different. VDM had courage, not the kind that comes from strength, but the kind that rises when fear shows up and refuses to sit down. From a young age, VDM noticed what others ignored: the bullying, the injustice, the quiet suffering of those who felt powerless. And every time something felt wrong, his heart reacted before his fear could stop him. One afternoon, while walking home from school, VDM heard cries behind the marketplace. A younger boy was surrounded by older kids, his lunch scattered on the ground, his eyes filled with fear. People passed by. Some slowed down. Some pretended not to see. VDM stopped. His heart pounded. His hands trembled slightly, but his feet moved forward. He stood between the bullies and the boy and said, calmly, "Leave him alone." They laughed. He was smaller, outnumbered, an easy target. But when they looked into his eyes, they saw something unfamiliar, a courage that didn't shake. Silence followed, and then they stepped back. That day, VDM walked the younger boy home, and though he said nothing about it, the town began to whisper. Some called him brave, others called him troublesome, but VDM didn't care. He only knew one thing: someone had to stand up. Weeks later, another challenge appeared. At the abandoned basketball court, older teens chased younger kids away, breaking hoops and claiming the place as theirs. Again, people watched. Again, fear filled the air. And again, VDM stepped forward. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "This place belongs to everyone. Stop destroying it." The teens tried to scare him, but VDM didn't flinch. His calm unsettled them. His confidence weakened them. And slowly, they left. That night, younger kids returned to play. VDM smiled and told them, "Don't let fear own what belongs to you." The town began to see it clearly now. This boy wasn't just fearless. He was becoming a leader. Then came the fire. One cold morning, smoke filled the street near the school. A small shop was burning. People shouted. Panic spread. Inside the shop, a little girl was trapped, crying, frozen in fear. Before anyone could react, VDM ran forward. He crawled through the smoke, covered his nose, and reached for her hand. His voice calm, "Hold me. You're safe." He let her out as the crowd watched in disbelief. That day, adults saw something they couldn't ignore. This was no ordinary boy. When asked later if he was afraid, VDM answered softly, "Courage doesn't mean no fear. It means helping anyway." But VDM realized something important. Courage shouldn't live in one person. So he gathered others, the shy ones, the bullied ones, the quiet ones with brave hearts, and he formed a group. He called them Rattels. We don't fight with fists. We fight with courage, kindness, and truth. Together, the Rattels helped kids walk home safely, cleaned abandoned spaces, and stood up wherever fear tried to rule. The town began to change. But every light attracts darkness. A notorious gang of older teens didn't like the attention. They wanted to break the Rattels. One night, They destroyed the basketball court again, leaving a warning behind. Radels, stay out of our way. Fear crept into the group, but VDM stood tall and said, courage isn't loud, it's consistent. Instead of fighting, the Rattels rebuilt the court together, piece by piece, side by side. The town watched in silence, and something shifted. Days later, the gang confronted them face to face. But this time, the town stood behind VDM. Parents, kids, elders. The gang realized they weren't facing a boy anymore. They were facing a movement. They left. Years passed. VDM grew older. The Rattels grew stronger. And the town remembered. Not because of fear, but because of courage. Because one boy refused to look away. The town never forgot the name VDM. Years had passed since the fearless boy first stood up at the marketplace. The basketball court still stood strong. The Rattels still existed. But VDM was no longer just a boy. He had grown taller, wiser, and the weight of leadership rested heavily on his shoulders. Because courage doesn't get easier with time. It gets tested. As VDM entered his late teens, the town began to change. New faces arrived. New businesses opened. But with growth came new problems. Corruption, greed, and voices that wanted to silence the truth. The Rattels had grown too. What started as a small group of kids had become a movement of young men and women, known for one thing. They stood up, always. They organized community cleanups, protected younger kids from harassment, and spoke out whenever something felt wrong. But not everyone liked that. One evening, VDM received a warning. A local figure, powerful, wealthy, untouchable, felt threatened by the Rattels' influence. You're teaching people to question too much. The message said, stop before you get hurt. For the first time in years, VDM felt fear crawl into his chest, not for himself, but for his people. That night, the Rattels gathered quietly. The air was heavy. Some wanted to back off. Some wanted to fight. VDM listened to them all, then spoke. We didn't start this to be famous. We started this so fear wouldn't win. If we stop now, then fear wins. Silence followed. Then one by one, they nodded. The pressure increased. False rumors spread about VDM. Authorities questioned the Rattels. Friends turned distant. And then, the attack came. One night, their meeting space was vandalized. Posters torn down. Walls spray-painted with one message: silence. The younger members were shaken. But VDM stood in the ruins and said, they want us scared. So let's respond with courage they can't destroy. Instead of hiding, the Rattels organized a public town meeting. No shouting, no violence, just truth. That day, VDM stood before the town. Older now, steady, unbroken. He spoke about injustice, about silence, about fear disguised as authority. His voice didn't shake. People listened. And for the first time, others began to speak too. Shop owners, parents, students. The fear that once ruled the town began to lose its grip. But courage always demands a price. VDM was arrested on false charges. The town froze. The Rattels panicked. But then something incredible happened. The town stood up. Peaceful protests filled the streets. Signs rose. Voices united. Free VDM. Days later, the truth came out. The charges collapsed. VDM walked free. But this time, he didn't walk alone. Standing outside, he looked at the crowd and felt something deeper than pride. Responsibility. He raised his voice and said, this movement was never about me. It's about all of us choosing courage. Every single day, the Rattels weren't just a group anymore. They were a symbol. Years later, VDM stood older still, watching new kids lead the Rattels. He had passed the torch. The town was different now. Not perfect, but awake. As a young boy once asked him, "Were you never afraid?" VDM smiled, the same way he did years ago. "Fear never left. I just never let it decide." The town that once feared silence was now known for courage, and at the center of that change stood VDM. He was no longer just a local leader, no longer just the founder of the Rattels. He had become something else entirely, a voice. As the years passed, stories of VDM traveled far beyond his hometown. Students shared his speeches online. Communities invited him to speak. Young people listened because he spoke their truth. VDM talked about fear, about injustice, about the danger of staying quiet when something is wrong. He never spoke with anger. He spoke with clarity, and that scared powerful people. With influence came pressure. False headlines appeared. Clips were taken out of context. People tried to twist his words. Some said he was too bold. Others said he should slow down. Even friends warned him, "VDM, you're becoming too loud." That night, VDM sat alone, staring at his phone, watching lies spread faster than truth. For the first time in a long while, he felt tired. The Rattels noticed the change. During a quiet meeting, one member asked, "Leader, is it time to step back?" VDM looked around the room, at faces once filled with fear, now filled with strength. And he answered softly, "If we step back now, everything we built becomes a story, not a future." Then came the defining moment. A national issue shook the country. Corruption exposed, voices silenced, youth ignored. People were angry, confused, looking for direction, and all eyes turned to VDM. He hesitated. This wasn't a playground. This wasn't a town meeting. This was bigger than him. But courage doesn't wait for comfort. VDM stepped forward. He released a message, not shouting, not attacking, but speaking the truth with calm fire. This is not about power. It's about people. And silence is no longer an option. Within hours, the message spread everywhere. Millions watched. Millions listened. The Rattels, now across cities and campuses, stood united. A movement was rising again. Pressure came fast. Threats, warnings, attempts to intimidate him. VDM's family begged him to slow down. One night, his mother asked quietly, "Is this worth your safety?" VDM held her hands and replied, "If fear decides our limits, then courage dies before it begins." The day of the national gathering arrived. Thousands filled the streets. Peaceful, focused, united. VDM stood before them, heart pounding, not afraid of the crowd, but of the responsibility. He spoke not as a hero, but as one of them. About fear he once felt as a boy. About standing alone. About choosing courage anyway. His voice cracked once, then grew stronger. And when he finished, the silence that followed was louder than any cheer. Change didn't come overnight, but something irreversible happened. People stopped waiting to be saved. They started standing. Years later, VDM sat quietly at the back of a hall, watching young leaders speak, former Rattels, new voices. They didn't need him at the front anymore. And that was the victory. A young girl approached him and asked, "Sir, how did you become fearless?" VDM smiled gently. "I didn't. I just decided fear wouldn't choose for me." This is the story of VDM, the fearless boy who became a leader, the leader who became a voice, and the voice that awakened courage in millions. Because fear may be loud, but courage, when shared, echoes forever. Watch out for the next episodes titled The Next Generation.
Thank you for spending this moment with Story Times. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more meaningful stories. Until next time, remember every story teaches a lesson,